Good evening and welcome to Chicago Tonight, Latino Voices. I'm Phil Ponce. On the show tonight...
When the hell are y'all gonna help us?
Breaking down the high-tension city council meeting over funding for migrants. A bill aimed at closing loopholes in property tax sales is headed for the governor's desk. Northeastern Illinois University received some welcome funding news in the latest state budget. We hear what the plans are for that money. Chicago provides the haunted setting for a new horror book. We talk with author Cynthia Palio about her novel, The Shoemaker's Magician. A preview of next week's Fiestas Patronales Puertorriqueñas in Humboldt Park.
I kind of have to just coexist with the two, even with the trauma.
And how art is being used as a tool for healing. All that coming up, but first, our top story tonight. This week's City Council meeting exploded over migrant funding. We hear from two alder people right after this.
Chicago Tonight, Latino Voices, is made possible in part by the support of these donors.
The Chicago City Council approved $51 million for migrant care this week, but the lead up to that vote was intense, emotional, and included racially charged remarks from audience members. Joining us now with more are Alderperson Jesse Fuentes of the 26th Ward and Alderman Byron Sigcho Lopez, who represents the 25th Ward. We reached out to several alder people who voted against the measure, but they declined our invitation to appear. But we thank you for being here very much. First of all, Alderperson Fuentes, why the intensity of the debate?
Well, I think that we have to look at what we saw yesterday from a historical lens. We have black communities across the city of Chicago that have seen centuries of disinvestment. We have unhoused siblings across the city of Chicago that have not received the resources to be housed. And so when we're talking about allocating $51 million to asylum seekers who have arrived to the city of Chicago, we have residents across the city of Chicago that are rightfully angry that they too need resources. Now, we voted for something that we had to vote for because we are in the middle of a humanitarian crisis, but we also have a moral obligation to seek very similar and in fact match funding for our west to south side communities as well as our unhoused siblings in the city of Chicago.
Alderman Sigcho Lopez, as Alderman Fuentes alluded to, the debate had much to do with largely African-American residents and the African-American community who said basically, look, why are you spending money on people who are coming to Chicago when historically our communities have not had the same degree of investment, have suffered from neglect. The resources should come here. And in fact, some of those remarks were directed towards you. One person yelled out, quote, "Go back to your own country." What's your reaction to this intensity, this vitriol to you and other members during the meeting?
And I agree with Alderperson Fuentes. I think that when we look at the reaction historically, I think it's important to acknowledge, right, that the disparities in our communities and the suffering right now with violence, with food insecurity, poverty, and affects the most poorest areas of the city. At the same time, I will be clear, I mean, some of the elements that were there, I mean, specifically about these remarks, were paid organizers that came with a very specific agenda.
Paid by whom?
But the Republican Party. I think that they were, you know, their PACs that even being set up. With a particular goal. There's election season, and we got to be clear that some of those remarks are not necessarily really a characteristic of what we're seeing in our communities. In our communities, and I think there's a poll not too long ago that many constituents in Chicago, what we want is people to work together. They want our Black caucus, we work with the Latino caucus to provide solutions. And that's, I think, what the council did. We also have to acknowledge that we're inheriting a big mess. Many of these residents, rightly so, were upset about the South Shore, a public high school that was repurposed without consent, without conversation, and after they've been repeated plans. So I understand what many of these residents have said. We reach out, we're working with them, but also we got to understand that there are also elements out there, especially with these remarks, that should not be taken as the sentiment in our communities where we see more coalition and more work in unity.
Well, we don't have time to go into to look into that further and discuss it with you, your assertion that of who was behind it. But Alderman David Moore voted no on the measure, and let's listen to his reasoning.
I'm reminded when the flight attendant says on the plane, in an emergency, make sure you put your mask on first before you help someone else. And so we have to put our mask on first, and we have to help the residents of this great city.
Alderman Fuentes, does he have a point? Alderperson Fuentes?
Well, I believe that, Alderman Moore has a responsibility to listen to his constituents and has a perspective. But there's a perspective that I respect more, and that was Alderperson Jeanette Taylor's, in that hurt people cannot hurt people. And we have a moral obligation to support folks that need our help. But we also understand that we have to go back and we have more work to do. We had conversations yesterday in the Latino caucus in how we have to be in partnership and in solidarity with our Black caucus siblings in City Council and ensure that when we are talking about budget coming up, and we'll be negotiating that soon in a couple months, that we have our Black caucus members in mind, that we have the West and South Side communities in mind, and that we do not forget the solidarity that they showed us yesterday.
And you alluded to Alderman Jeanette Taylor, and here's what she had to say in part.
I got a community that's divided. I've been getting calls for the last 3 days. You should vote on this. You shouldn't. This is wrong. It's all wrong. Saying no doesn't mean that I want to hurt migrant families. Voting yes does not mean I don't care about Black Chicago.
And she went on to vote yes in a very impassioned, presence there. Alderman Cynthia Lopez, how would you describe right now? Is there tension between Black and Latino city council members? Did this make things worse? Did it create a schism? How would you assess it?
Well, I think that naturally there are tensions when there's no solutions, when there's no plan. Right now, the migrant crisis, when we asked Mayor Lightfoot last year, back in September, that we needed to take action, especially as we see that Title 42 was going to be lifted eventually, as it happened. And without
And what is that, real quickly?
So Title 42 basically had a lot of restrictions, right, in terms of how migrants are in the border. And I think when Title 42 was lifted, we knew that there was going to be an influx of people who were waiting. Now, when we saw that influx of people, the city was completely unprepared. There was not even one single piece of paper that the administration left the current mayor to take these on. This means we had enough time, right? So the tensions are real when we see, of course, the frustration from residents, when we see kids in police stations, when we see the city, with violence that gets worse and worse. And again, we need solutions. So I think the tensions rise because people don't see a functional government, they don't see a solution, and they see these political parties playing games with people's lives. I do think, however, that is a new day in the council because, again, as the mayor mentioned, it was really remarkable how the council democratically, despite of the challenges, and again, I reassert my what I saw with my evidence in our Republican Party that is putting to set an agenda, and I think we have a responsibility not to let the fear-mongering divide us, but to bring us all together for solutions.
And Alderman Fuentes, I'll close with you, but one of the things that we mentioned before we started speaking was that most of the migrants since August have been from Venezuela. How exactly is the money going to be used?
Well, we want to make sure that the $51 million can provide meals, transportation, clothes for the individuals that are in shelters. We know that this is a drop in the bucket, right? We know that this is only the beginning of the type of support that our new arrivals need. But we are also going to make sure that we are reaching out to our federal colleagues and our state colleagues because other levels of government need skin in the game, and the city of Chicago needs support.
And that's where we'll have to leave it. Alderperson Jesse Fuentes and Alderman Byron Cynthia Lopez, thank you both for being here. Very much appreciated. And up next, Brandis Friedman with details on a bill to help close property tax loopholes in Cook County in a conversation that first aired on Chicago Tonight.
Legislation designed to close loopholes in Cook County's property tax system is headed to Governor J.B. Pritzker's desk. The bill aims to stop a system that's helped fuel disinvestment in majority Black and Latino communities for generations. WTTW News reporter Heather Sharon joins us now with more. Heather, so this legislation is the result of a concerted effort by Cook County Treasurer Maria Pappas's office to revamp the systems designed to return distressed properties saddled with mountains of debt to productive use. What would change?
Well, when you don't pay your property taxes, the interest rate on that rises to 18% a year. This legislation would slash that in half to 9%. And Maria Pappas's office says that will save Chicago homeowners, or Cook County homeowners, I should say, between $25 and $35 million a year. A huge savings that will help people keep their properties and their homes.
The legislation, it's also set to revamp Cook County's property tax scavenger sale. What's in store there?
So if you don't pay your property taxes for 3 years, the county can auction off your property, and they held those sales every 2 years. But few properties that go up for auction in those sales are purchased and put back to productive use. So this legislation would give Cook County more ability to take control of the properties that don't sell and get them back on the tax rolls and put to productive use.
So the bill, it also takes aim at a loophole that allowed hedge funds to take advantage of unpaid tax debt at the expense of Black and Latino homeowners. How does it do that?
So every year, unpaid tax debt goes up for another auction, and big hedge funds and other investment firms, they buy that debt and put liens on people's houses, and that is lucrative for them. They can earn as much as 54% over the next 3 years. And then they don't actually have to complete the sale. They can just sort of point to an error, sometimes clerical, and get out of the whole deal and take those savings and interest payments with them. This law would sort of make it harder for them to get out of those sales at the last minute, and hopefully preventing them from preying on people who haven't been able to pay their taxes.
Okay, Heather Sharon, thank you so much.
Thanks, Brandis.
And you can read Heather's full story on our website. That's WTTW.com/news. Back with more Chicago Tonight Latino Voices right after this.
The Illinois state budget that was passed this week included increased funding for higher education. And that was welcome news to Northeastern Illinois University, which has seen some financial and institutional turbulence in recent years and also just reached a tentative agreement with its faculty to avoid a strike. Chair of the Board of Trustees, Jose Rico, says the increased funding will offer some much-needed stabilization for its diverse student body.
We serve really the population of the city of Chicago. 60% of our students are women, 60% are students of color. We have the largest and longest federally recognized Hispanic serving institution, where 40% of our students are Latino. And so in order for us to fulfill the mission of working class students, first-time college-going students, students that really want to be able to provide for their families, we need state support, because in order for us to stay accessible, we need to keep our tuition and fees as low as possible. And so the 7% increase, which comes out to about $40 million of appropriations from the state, allows us to be able to continue our work without an additional tuition increase this year. And we want to be able to keep that going on for the future. We've had a tough years. You know, these last 3 years have been very difficult for us and other universities. You know, I came on as a board of trustees with my fellow board of trustees, where most of us are new, in March. And we heard by our university community, every meeting we had, how difficult the budget crisis of the last administration affected them, how difficult the pandemic has affected the low enrollment. We were the only university this year that were in contract negotiations that did not go on a strike. So it's a lot of it had to do with the work that we did as a board of trustees to build that trust and open communications. And a lot of it is that we've been operating in good faith and will continue to do so, as we saw in our collective effort to get increased funding to our university.
And you can find out more about what else is in the state budget on our website. Chicago provides the dark setting for an homage to horror films and history in a new novel by Hermosa native Cynthia Palio. In The Shoemaker's Magician, Palio blends film history and Chicago history into a genre-crossing journey into the occult that begins with the discovery of a gruesome murder in a downtown theater. And author Cynthia Palio joins us now. That sounds very scary. Cynthia Palio, your new book is called The Shoemaker's Magician, as I said, and you've written other books to much acclaim, but give us a brief plot description of this one without giving away too much.
So The Shoemaker's Magician follows Sebastian Ramos, who is a homicide detective, and he discovers a body on stage at the Chicago Theater one night with a poster of an old 1920s film affixed to the body. And his wife, Paloma Ramos, is a horror host on YouTube, and she's an expert on all things horror films. And so both of them work together to solve increasing body counts of bodies being found throughout various historic Chicago theaters.
Now, this book offers perspective from several characters, but as you just mentioned, one of the central characters, is Paloma. What can you tell us about Paloma?
Paloma is obsessed and in love with all things horror films, all things Chicago. She is a horror host. She works from home, and she is completely drawn to the city and the magic that the city has to offer. And so one of the things that is very important to her and has been central to her life is the comfort that horror movies have given her.
The comfort that horror movies have given her, but also the comfort that the city of Chicago gives her, because Chicago is very much a character in your book. How is it a character? What role does the city play?
Chicago is central to all of my work, and I feel like Chicago is this beautiful mix of light and dark, and especially in The Shoemaker's Magician. A lot of people don't realize that Chicago was Hollywood before there was Hollywood, and Chicago was the silent film capital of the world. Charlie Chaplin worked here. He filmed numerous movies here. And so Chicago takes center stage again as we learn about the history of the silent film era in the city of Chicago, and we learn about these wonderful theaters, the Logan Theater, the Chicago Theater, the Uptown, which is a beautiful theater that's been closed for many years, but it features prominently all these beautiful things.
You were born in Puerto Rico, but you were raised in Chicago. You came to Chicago when you were 2 years old, and you still live in the same neighborhood that you did when you were a girl, which is the Hermosa neighborhood west of Logan Square. Why do you still live there?
Chicago's home. I've been to 20 countries. I've visited every single state in the United States, and there's something that is magical about here, about the city. And I recently lost my father. He came to Chicago in the 1960s, and Roberto Rodriguez loved this city, and he taught me to love Chicago as well. And I feel the magic here. I live a few blocks away from where Walt Disney was born. L. Frank Baum wrote parts of the Wonderful Wizard of Oz in Humboldt Park when my father would take me. And this is home. I think it's an absolutely magical place to live.
You mentioned your father. Your father would read to you when you were a kid. What impact did that have on you?
So my father read me fairy tales in particular, and he would recite fairy tales that he remembered from when he was a young boy. And that is what is incorporated into all of my fiction today. So I write genre-blending fairy tales. The Shoemaker's Magician is a fable, and the book one in the series, The Children of Chicago, is an adaptation of the Pied Piper fairy tale. And you could read each of them as a standalone, but all of my works are fairy tale adaptations.
How do you define horror? What is horror?
What is horror? I think fear is a central emotion that we all experience, and horror is the unknown. It's something that scares us. It's something that we're also trying to process, these awful, scary things. So for me, horror is the unknown and these things that are threatening us and like looming in the shadows.
And my understanding is that you draw on, how have you drawn on experiences in your own life that make their way into your books? Last question.
Sure. So, for example, in The Shoemaker's Magician, one of the characters, Bella, who's named after Bella Lugosi, is an autistic character, and I'm a mother of two children that are on the autism spectrum. Paloma Ramos loves all things classic Hollywood horror, and so those elements have been incorporated into The Shoemaker's Magician as well. So this is probably the most autobiographical book in a way. Paloma Ramos does have many elements of who I am. While she's not a writer, she's still a creator. She's a creative, and being a creative, sometimes you're very isolated. And being a horror writer, we're very isolated as well because we have to tap into elements and places of our mind in order to create.
Well, your creations have been met with a lot of critical acclaim. You're clearly on the ascendancy, and thank you for spending time with us, Cynthia Palio. Again, the book is called The Shoemaker's Magician. You can read an excerpt on our website if you're not too scared. And we're back with more right after this. A local art student is using her artwork to explore her religious upbringing. It's a process about 4 years in the making after years of trauma. Now she's using art as a tool to move forward. Arts correspondent Angel Edu recently caught up with artist Jackie Patino to learn more about her work, and here's another look.
My parents didn't grow up with a lot of money, so we didn't go to art museums, but church became the art museum for me. The glass-stained, colorful imagery, that became the visual language. When I first started practicing drawing, I first started with religious figures because I wanted to make my parents proud.
But art student Jackie Patino says her relationship with religion dramatically changed during her teenage years.
Catholicism in general is so prevalent in being Latino and Latine. It's really hard to separate the two. There was a period of time where my mom thought that I was possessed by something. She kind of thought that our whole family was possessed or being attacked by a demon of some sort. And it was very hard to both watch my mom and my family in general kind of go through this stage of madness.
That madness, Patino describes, would soon reach a breaking point.
So after a couple of years of just going through constantly being told that there's a demon in you, the catalyst was my mom had an exorcism done on me, so I had to be cleansed. In her words, after the exorcism was done, she kind of for her it was healing, but for me it was kind of just it was complete opposite.
Patino would go on to use her art not only to process what had happened to her, but use it as a tool to both heal and forgive.
There's little symbols in my pieces, the lime is very reoccurring. In the exorcism, she had to rub me with the lime and candles, and I kind of use that as just a symbol to represent both the exorcism, cleansing, but also the opposite of cleansing.
In addition to self-portraits, portraying her pet chickens are another important theme within Patino's work.
Animals in general kind of show an unconditional love that I really appreciate. They really help me reconnect with that history that I have in Mexico and my identity, and that's been the one thing. Chickens in general have been the one things that help me connect.
Patino says her journey is still very much a process, now identifying as agnostic and queer.
What do you think when you see these different versions of yourself?
Oh, interesting. I feel a little sadness in them, but also a little hopeful. So there's one in the corner and I'm holding two mice's hands. I both feel sadness, but also happiness for them, because it's that version is a baby version of me. And I feel bad for it because I know what the past version's gonna go through, but then I also feel happy because I know where I am now.
For Chicago Tonight Latino Voices, I'm Angel Ito.
If you're interested in seeing more of Patino's self-portraits or her chickens, her art will be on display at, quote, a very serious gallery, close quote, in River West from August 11th through September 9th. If this week's warm weather has you in the mood for a taste of the islands, Fiestas Patronales Puertorriqueñas is back next weekend in Humboldt Park. The celebration kicks off with a community day on Thursday, June 8th, and continues through the weekend with a parade, carnival, musical and dance performances, arts, workshops, and, of course, plenty of good food.
Next Saturday, the 10th of June at 2 o'clock, the 45th, listen to what I said, 45th Puerto Rican People's Day Parade will start on Division and Campbell on Paseo Boricua.
We want to preserve the legacy and the traditions of the Puerto Rican community and our culture. And I remember coming out to this festival, as a kid with my parents and my grandmother. So it's very personal to me as well, this event, and I want to see it to keep going and keep rising and growing.
And once again, Fiestas Patronales Puertorriqueñas will be at Humboldt Park from June 8th to 11th, and you can find more information on our website. And that is our show for tonight. For all of us here at Chicago Tonight, Latino Voices, I'm Phil Ponce, and I thank you for watching. Good night.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a proud sponsor of diversity, equity, and inclusion-focused free continuing legal education for lawyers throughout the region.
Next time.
Was it a quarrel or an execution?
When Inspector Sullivan investigates a murder.
This is the work of George Kavanagh.
He's framed.
None of that is mine.
I have been instructed to arrest you.
The world turned upside down.
Father Brown.
Saturday at 7 on WTTW.